the first story I'd like you to tell is really one that just is so on time right now with the end of college basketball approaching. Is the great story behind those iconic NCAA champions, those things that come out when once a team wins. That started like somewhere. Would you
Yeah.
tell us the Scooby-Doo mystery behind that story?
Absolutely. There were a lot of fun things I got to work on and do when I was at Nike. You know, I got Nike sued by the Beatles. We were the first ones to use an Aerosmith song in an ad. Just lots. I had Dick Gregory. My last thing I did at Nike was get the civil rights icon Dick Gregory to appear in a Nike ad. But I think the one that I am proudest of was the hat. And so that would be my epitaph. If my wife decides to do a tombstone someplace on it, I said, just put the hat. And the backstory in the hat was 1988, Nike started an ad campaign called Just Do It. And it resonated with consumers everywhere. Nike is still using Just Do It as the tagline to their advertising 30 years later. So I had just transitioned from the legal department to a department called Special Projects. And one of the first things I did was like, how can we extend the Just Do It campaign, take it off of just TV ads? And what I came up with was we would do hand pennants or signs where it would be like, if it was Ohio State, it would say Buckeyes Just Do It, and people in the stands would be holding on these little signs or hand pennants with their team names. And we did it with colleges, professional sports teams. We did it with pretty much everything. So the NCAA tournament was coming up in 1989. And I thought, gee, wouldn't it be great if there was a way of ambush marketing the tournament? Nike's view was that the kids on most of the teams were wearing Nike products, so we had a legitimate reason to be there. But is there a way of promoting our Just Do It campaign that might be a little bit out of the ordinary? So we had a wonderful relationship with one of the coaches. PJ Carlissimo was coaching the Seton Hall team at the time. They were going to be in the national finals against Michigan. And I didn't have any budget, so we went and we made these painter's caps. Now, this painter cap says Just Do It 25, and it was given out at Nike's 25th anniversary to all the employees. This year, actually, Nike is 50 years old. So it was a cheap hat, but instead of Just Do It, we put Just Did It #1. And we didn't have a swoosh on it because we figured everybody would get the Just Do It part, referencing Nike's great ad campaign, which was in its second year at the time. So we had the hats made and we gave it to the student manager at Seton Hall. Michigan was widely favored in the game. We told the Seton Hall kid, though, we're giving them to you just in case Seton Hall comes through. The Michigan coach had quit his job at Michigan right before the tournament, taking a job at Arizona State, and the athletic director told him, you can't coach. So they had a new coach. We didn't have any relationship with him. So kind of rolled the dice, gave it to Seton Hall. Student manager had a box of hats, which he kept near the end of the bench. The game ended up with a Michigan kid hitting 2 free throws, putting Michigan ahead. Seton Hall comes down, they take a 3-pointer and they miss. So Michigan wins. The Seton Hall student manager sitting there with a box of hats, and he had to know what to do with them. My team lost, but he figured, maybe if I do Nike a solid and get the hats on the Michigan kids, when I graduate and I'm applying for jobs, they will remember this. So he goes out on the court and he starts handing out all of these hats to the Michigan players. And I think, David, if you get the next slide, that's a hat signed by all the Michigan players, which one of them kept. It's probably worth a lot now. But now let's take a look. The next slide. And there's all the Michigan players, and you can see they have a Just Did It #1 hat. And for 30 years, I had no idea how the hat got to the Seton Hall players. Okay, so I contacted the student managers. So you got to remember, these guys are now in their 50s. If 1989, they were student managers at Michigan. And they said they don't know how the hats got there. They'd love to take, credit for it, but it wasn't their responsibility. I contacted the student sports information director at Seton Hall, and he said, we don't keep records of, who got what hat, or what the student managers did. So I wrote an article for Slam magazine talking about the hats. And I happened to be talking to a lady named Dana O'Neill, who writes for The Athletic magazine. I was telling her this story, how I couldn't find out, 30 years, I couldn't find out how the kids got the hats. And she said, well, I'm writing a book on the Big East Athletic Conference, and I know some people at Seton Hall. Let me try to find out. And in one day, she did what it took me 30 years to not be able to do. She called me back the next day, and she said, I know how the hats got there. I'm going to write an article about it in The Athletic. So she put me in touch with the young man who was a student manager at Seton Hall. And he told me that. I walked out in the court and I'm just handing out the hats, and all the kids are putting them on. So I thought, well, I'm on to a good thing. So the next year, the next slide, David, is University of Las Vegas at University of Nevada, Las Vegas. They won the national championship. So I had Just Did It #1 hats. We got 2 years in a row. We've got these hats. We're getting a tremendous amount of exposure. The next year, I made up another hat, and that one I don't have because it became useless. And the hat said, Just Did It Again, #1. UNLV was the best team in the country. They went into the tournament, I think 34-0. And they got upset by Duke in the semifinals. So I get out of the hat making business. But that is the first time that anybody in any sport used hats as their, crowning achievements. They used to give laurel wreaths. Different Olympic champions would get a laurel wreath. That was the closest I could find to anybody doing anything like this. So that is next when you watch the finals, the NCAA finals, or if you watch the Super Bowl, World Series, or any pretty much US based anyway sporting event, when they put on the hats, you'll be able to amaze your viewing partners with that, the background, how that particular tradition started off.
Well, that is the origin of it. I mean, since that moment, they've come out with every team has all kinds of ready-made shirts and everything to go. It is really.
And this is the new one, David. This is when Virginia won the championship in 2009. Gold embroidery on the national champions, and I don't know what you call this little thing on the hat, but they're considerably nicer than the painter's caps that we did in 1989. So it's a nice tradition. I'd love to get it to expand to have folks in Europe do it when the Champions League crowns a champion. But so far, as far as I'm aware, it's only a US based tradition.
Well, and you own it. The next piece of Mark Thomas / Nike lore involves real heavyweights.
Okay, yes. Trying to remember the year. I think it was 1992. Nike did an ad called Secret Tournament. And the premise of the ad was there was this big ship out in a harbor, I think in Europe. And the great players in the world all took rowboats out there. And it's kind of like the Fight Club of soccer. So they played a 3-on-3 tournament in this cage, right, in the hull of the ship. And the two creatives from our ad agency couldn't figure out what music they wanted for this. And they were in Amsterdam. They did the ad. They were working in our ad agency's Amsterdam office, and they attended a movie, Ocean's 11, I think it was. And in the movie, they played this song, this Elvis song, which a little more action, a little less conversation, which I think had been in one of his Hawaii movies. Pretty much nobody knew the song. It was just just in it for a second in Ocean's 11, but these two guys loved the song. So they wanted to use it in the ad campaign, and they told me to go out and secure it. So they gave me $100,000 budget. Now this is an Elvis Presley song, and to get the music, you had to deal with Elvis's estate, a record label, and a music publisher, each of whom wanted $500,000 for it. So we were ways apart on our $100,000 budget, and the first offer coming from the three as 1.5 million. But we were lucky that there was a guy working for the music label in the UK and got what the premise of the ad was, because the premise of the ad was we were going to have the best soccer players in the world appearing in an ad, and we wanted to use Elvis music at a time when they were coming out with an album called Elvis 30 #1 Singles. And he says, let me make a couple phone calls, and he gets back to me and he says, great news. Since this campaign is going to be so big, it was going to be Nike's largest advertising campaign ever from a media buy perspective. We can do it for $200,000. And I said, I don't have 200,000. I only have 100, when they had come down for 1.5 million, but cooler heads prevailed. I got the extra 100,000, and we used the music in the campaign. So let's show you the ad.
Where's the cage? The rematch doesn't need a cage. And this time, first to 100 wins. 1 year! Come on! Google for this one! Who is on fire? Henry is on fire! Next goal win!
That's great commercial.
Great commercial. And I'll send David a link to one of the other ones, because the other ones, they're actually playing in a cage. They're just a metal cage. This one, for the championship, they took away the cage and they used the whole hull of the ship. Great ad. Let's see the next slide, David.
Come on.
No, that's
Where's the cage?
okay. There's the one. Okay, so there are the protagonists of my story. There's the Beatles with Elvis. There's Eric Cantona, the famous footballer who was the guy up top, and there's one other guy in it. I don't know. Can you see him? There's one other guy in that, I think, in the slide.
Yeah, you might. It might be hard for you to see with your our slides. Our images covered over it. You may have to just slide it over to see.
Oh, okay.
Drag
Well,
our.
I'll have your audience do that. Okay. So the song went to #1 in 22 countries based on the fact that it appeared in an ad for Nike. Okay, it appeared on #1. It became #1 single in the United States, which is interesting because the only place we ran the ad in the US was on Spanish language Televisa. But it became a #1 single in the UK. And the interesting part about that was, at the time the ad ran, the Beatles and Elvis each had 17 #1 singles. So 25 years after Elvis died, a little known song of his appeared in a Nike ad, and it allowed him to break the 25-year-old tie between he and the Beatles for #1 singles in the UK.
Did you get a thank you note from Elvis's estate or anything like that?
You know what I got? You know, it's funny. I gave it to I can't, let's see. I wonder if you can see that on the wall. They do when something becomes like a gold or platinum record, they do this like poster of it. And I got an appreciation from the Elvis, they should have paid us basically. I know we only paid him $200,000, but the amount of publicity
Right.
this guy, and what they did was on there, it said Elvis 30 #1 singles plus little more action, a little less conversation, as heard in the Nike ad. That's how they promoted the CD. But the other interesting part about this, besides the Beatles Elvis part, was the power of FIFA. So instead of Cantona, they wanted to have the other guy pictured. Let's see, will you be able to, can the other people see this, David?
I think they can see everyone on the slide. Yeah.
Okay. So the other guy in the slide was a guy named Pierluigi Collina, who was one of the famous soccer referees. So I presented the ad to him because we wanted him to play the role that Cantona eventually played. And he said, I love the concept. He said, but I've got 3 more years before I am set to retire. And if I do a Nike ad, I will be blackballed by FIFA because Adidas is the official sponsor of FIFA, the governing body of soccer. And they would not take kindly to me appearing in a Nike ad. So he declined being in the ad. And the interesting thing for me was I told one of our European marketing guys that I was talking to Pierluigi Collina, and he couldn't believe it. We at Nike, we got to talk to a lot of famous sports people and entertainment people. And this guy thought that this was the greatest thing of all time, that somebody was talking to Pierluigi Collina. But that's how that ad ended. And I think Elvis has actually had a couple more posthumously #1 hits, but that was the one that broke the tie between Elvis and the Beatles.
It's not like you'd think Elvis Presley would need any help from anyone, but Mark Thomashow was able to help Elvis Presley.
Yeah, our ad guys, the agency. Thank you.
Do you see how he does it? Always deferring to the team. Everyone take note. But sorry for the Beatles, what you did, but you were able to think about them again, weren't you?
Yeah, well, you know what? No, this was actually 3 years before. The next thing. So this was Sweet Revenge for this one. So this one, and it's a good article. I think it's called Magnet. It's an online magazine talking about music issues. And basically they're talking about, in this article, which you can look up, how Nike used the Beatles song Revolution in an ad campaign. And then Nike got sued for using the ad in an ad campaign. So if you flip to the next one, at the top of the Beatles, and from one of their albums, they have the Revolution campaign. The bottom is Nike Air Max shoe. And when the shoe came out in 1989, Nike had air in the soles of its shoes for a long time before somebody figured out a way, why don't we show the consumer what we mean by Nike has air in the bottom of the shoe. So they did this little cutout on the sole, and you can look in and you can actually see the airbags. So Nike wanted to do an ad campaign promoting the shoe. Our ad agency said, we got a revolutionary new shoe and cushioning system. What would be a good song for this? So they said, well, why don't we use the Beatles' Revolution? Which seemed like a good idea. The Beatles had sold the rights to all of their songs, and I'll have to do a quick digression into how music works. But music, you have 2 parts to any song. One is the publishing rights. So if David and I wrote a song together and recorded it, we would own the publishing rights, the music and lyrics. Once we did our version of the song, anybody else in the world who wants to do that song pays a small mechanical licensing fee and can do the song. So there's 100 versions of Hey Jude out there. There were several versions of Revolution. So we were going to need to get the publishing rights, because if you don't have the publishing rights, you can't do anything with the song. If you have the publishing rights and you can't get the master recording rights, you can have somebody else record the song. The Beatles had sold all of their publishing rights to this guy, Sir Lou Grade, who was this big UK music impresario. He ended up selling it to this guy, Robert Holmes de Court, who was an Australian venture capitalist. Paul McCartney had told Michael Jackson that a good financial investment was buying publishing catalogs. Okay, so somebody owns all of, the publishing from the Beatles or the Temptations or whoever. Michael took Paul at his word and said, yeah, that's a good idea. So the Beatles portfolio that this guy in Australia owned, Michael and Paul get in a bidding war for, and Paul lost out and was very upset that he lost out. Michael had to, as part of the deal, had to fly to Australia and sing at the guy's wife's birthday party. But I guess he got it. That was an okay thing to do. So he went down there. So now they had the rights. Michael Jackson had the rights, and I got through his attorney, who's a big civil rights attorney in LA. I found out who was helping Michael in licensing music. And he had made a big deal that he was, going to be very selective about who he would license the music to. But we were able to secure a deal with Michael to get the publishing rights. And then we wanted to see what we could do to get the Beatles version. We were told, our guy in the UK said, there's no way. And they won't even meet with you about it. But they had given the rights to Capitol Records in the US, in North America, to put out all of their music. So we went to Capitol, we were able to secure a deal, and we only were able to do it because Yoko sent her and John's business advisor to the meeting, and at the meeting said Yoko would really like to see this happen. Yoko had no rights to the music, but as a courtesy, whenever Michael Jackson licensed the Beatles, anything John and Paul had written, they would go to Yoko and say, how do you feel about this? And so she was in favor of them licensing us the publishing rights. And then with her intervention, we were able to secure a license for the Beatles' their recording of the song, which nobody had ever done commercially before and nobody's ever done since. Nike's use of the Beatles version of their music is the only time it has ever been used in a commercial, which was all great. And then we got sued by the Beatles and they sued us and they sued Capitol Records and they sued our ad agency, Wideman Kennedy. And they said that basically Capitol did not have the rights to license the music out for advertising. And what I had realized later was this was like the third lawsuit between Capitol and Apple over who owned the rights to the music. When Apple Records, right, the Beatles record label, sold the rights to license the music in North America, it was done like on a dinner napkin. It was not the usual 40-page contract that you have now. And part of the issue was the advent of CDs. So now whoever had the rights to do the Beatles music on CDs stood to make hundreds of millions of dollars, and the Beatles wanted that right back. So they were always suing Capitol, saying they're breaching our agreement, which was kind of hard to prove because the agreement didn't cover a lot of different things. But in any case, by Capitol licensing the music to Nike, the Beatles were able to go in once again and say, hey, we never gave them the right to license our music for advertising. We don't want our music being used in advertising. They eventually settled the lawsuit between Capitol and Apple. Nike never even signed the settlement agreement. It worked out extremely well for Nike because it showed Phil Knight, the guy who started Nike, the power of advertising. You don't always want it to be you getting sued by one of the most popular rock and roll bands in the world, but it worked out in this particular case. And I think it's also the first example of a really big piece of music being used in advertising. And the publicity around it was horrendous. All these people saying, you know, what an abomination that Nike is using the Beatles music in advertising. And we've come a long way in the 30 years since, because there's pretty much nobody, possibly Neil Young, but I don't know if anybody besides Neil Young who doesn't allow his music to be used in advertising. So I think we opened the floodgates. But one of the things that I think was good about that was it does expose the music to another generation. My nephews were 10 and 11 years old when we did the Revolution ad. They weren't listening to the Beatles all the time on oldie stations at their home, but they heard the music in that ad campaign, and they became a little bit more curious about the Beatles. And I don't think that was a unique story. I think a lot of people, you hear music where you hear music now, and it being used in a good advertising campaign, I think, can add to the value of the music.
It's so true. My daughter will be singing a song, and I'll be like, "How did you ever come across that?" And it's through this kind of advertising. Thank you for educating. For such a historic ad, such a historic movement in advertising is a really big deal. I want to remind everyone, if you have a question, we will have some time for question and answer at the end, but if you have a question or a thought that you want to share with Mark as we're going through this, drop it in the Q&A. I'll see it, and I'll bring it to our attention. We will answer everyone's questions for everything.
Next one, let's see, what do we get up next?
Yeah, so these are a couple ads where there was always a yes, but boy, was it great. And this is the, I believe, Tiger.
Yeah.
Would you like me to show it, or?
Yeah, let's show it, and then we'll go back to the music that's in it.
Okay. Oh, that's Revolution.
That's Revolution.
So let's watch this.
I never get tired of seeing that.
We all want to change the world.
Okay.
That's so good. I just want to say, and I also think you and your friends at Wyden and Nike, you started a thing where you didn't say, "Hey, hi, I'm Michael Jordan," or "Hi, I'm John." You would just introduce the athlete without introduction into an incredibly artful ad. And I thought it was all the more impactful and cool because you did it that way.
Yeah, I agree with that, David. And we took them off the pedestal if they were on a pedestal, and we tried to show them as people, and they were often a butt of the joke and
Right.
deprecating. So
Brilliant.
see what else we got.
Okay, so here we go.
Okay, so this next one, we had an ad for Tiger Woods. We wanted some music for it, and on the upper part of the screen you will see Peter Gabriel, and Gabriel wrote the other guy in the scene, not the guy down below clapping, but the Black gentleman is Steve Biko, and Biko was an anti-apartheid activist in South Africa and was killed by the police in South Africa. And Gabriel wrote a very moving song about Biko. So the premise of the ad that you're gonna see is the first ad Nike did with Tiger Woods, and it was "Hello World." And there's a line in the ad where Tiger is saying that there are golf clubs that he cannot play at because of the color of his skin. So the ad guys thought, wow, Biko would be a great song for this, right? So I called up Peter Gabriel, and he was actually at a shopping mall in Los Angeles with his daughter when I was talking to him about we would like to use the song. And we went back and forth, and he wanted to know how many clubs there are in the US that Tiger can't compete in. At the time, Tiger had won the US amateur title 3 times. So I'm not sure there were a whole lot of golf clubs, maybe some in the deep South, that wouldn't allow Tiger to play on them. But I don't think there was a lot, but there were still some. And the premise of the ad was, this is a guy who's going to revolutionize the game of golf, and he's going to bring more people into it. And Gabriel struggled with it, and he said, I just, the song's just, it's just too personal for me. So, thanks for considering it, but I don't want to allow it. So the guy on the left, and anybody who knows the guy on the left gets extra credit from David in his class, because he is Hans Zimmer, who probably, aside from John Williams, is probably the top composer of music film scores. And he had a song that our guy said, if we can't get Biko, let's use what was it? I think Rain or Rainmaker, I think was the name of the song. Let's use that in the ad. So David will show you the ad. And, if you can't get Peter Gabriel, getting Hans Zimmer is a nice second choice.
Not a bad second choice.
I apologize for the quality. I'm just getting these on YouTube. So you can probably find a better version if you're interested. It's a good ad.
Yeah, it's a terrific ad. And I think his father actually did hold him up to the heavens when he was born, like in Lion King.
Really? Let's see, what do we have for the next? Oh, okay. So there's a distinguished NYU professor, Spike Lee, with Little Penny. And I don't know if Tyra Banks is still on TV, but there's Tyra in Little Penny. And Little Penny, actually, that was taken at a Knicks game that we bought Spike's tickets from, and we had Tyra and Little Penny attend the Knicks game. Now, when you have Little Penny without the 6 puppeteers that it takes to operate him, he's just kind of sitting there. And but he has a 96 in, it's Ken Griffey Jr., right? And Nike ran Ken Griffey Jr., a baseball player for the Seattle Mariners, for president in 1996. And he didn't win, but we like to think he paved the way for Obama winning 8 years later. So here's an ad that we did. It was called Little Penny's Super Bowl Party. So there's a lot of sports and entertainment celebrities in it. You'll see Stevie Wonder, you'll see Ken Griffey Jr., George Gervin. So we'll show you the ad, then I'll tell you how they wanted to end the ad. But let's see the ad. Hopefully it'll be the next slide.
Okay, and I appreciate the questions coming in. We'll get to all of them, I promise. We'll finish out this final great story of advertising.
Hey, Tara, don't you hear that bell ringing? Hey, come on in. Jets will be next year's Super Bowl. Hey, okay, so man. Welcome to my party. party. I got dancing food and Terrence Chris Darby in my backyard. Who does a brother have to know to get a little taste of potato salad?
Party, good party. How's the party? Party's good? Oh, yeah.
Hey, Michael Johnson, slow down, my brother.
You slow down, LP. Hey, look, Benny, got a ping pong ball in the gumbo.
Hey, anybody got any antibiotics? Cause I got a bad case of boogie fever. Party over here. Party over there.
Hey, party, little Kenny.
Benny, show your body, boy.
Hey, Tiger, I am little Benny.
Want to take this? Maybe later. Yeah, I missed the Maxwell commercial.
Absolute is the bomb. Ain't nobody busting that lock.
Little Penny's large. You gotta be at a penny party.
We got to live. And like Mr. Darby says, let's live together. Can you do that for a brother? And Tyra Banks, will you marry me?
It's funny, the creatives at White and Kenny often do things because they have an affinity for something they want to show up in the ad. So you saw the mascot from Wake Forest University, and that's because the creative went to Wake Forest. He was a big Terrence Trent D'Arby fan, so he's singing the song in the background. He wanted to meet Tyra Banks, so he put Tyra Banks in the ad. He had the little kid who was in the movie, Jerry Maguire was in the movie, in the film. So, but what they wanted to do, right, was end the ad in a special way. So they wanted to have a limo pull up to the apartment, and this lady was going to get out of the limo. It's the next slide, I hope.
Yep, hold on. Come on.
Hey, Tyra, don't you hear that bell ringing?
I apologize. Hold on.
Hey, Tyra.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. So that's Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of wherever she's a Duchess of. And we were going to have her. We wanted to have her. And so I called her along with our sports marketing guy. And we had what I thought was going really well, a conversation about her appearing in the ad, and she would be getting out of the limo. But she was concerned. They had planned, this is when she and Andrew were still together. They had planned to go to Argentina on a family vacation. And she just, am I a good mom? And I'm saying, you do this ad and your kids are going to think you're the greatest mom of all time because it's going to be on at the Super Bowl. You're going to be a star. So as we're talking to her, we didn't close the door and two sports marketing guys walk in, right? And they start to interrupt us. And I said, wait, guys, quiet. We're talking to the Duchess of York. And they go, yeah, and I'm the King of England, and walked out. So Sarah did not agree to be in the ad. I don't think that was the deal killer for her, but it didn't help. So that's it, guys. That's what I have. Any questions?
Those are great shares. Yeah, we got questions. We got questions for you. And I'm the King of England. Here's a question from Professor David Fuller. He says, how about when athletes go wrong? Tiger, Lance, Sharapova, Pistorius. When and where do you draw the line when athletes behave badly?
That is a wonderful question. I'll tell you one thing we do. So the one of the gyms, there are 3 gyms on the Nike campus. One of them was the Lance Armstrong Fitness Center. It is now the building formerly known as the Lance Armstrong Fitness Center. The child care center was the Joe Paterno Child and Development Center, and in all the Penn State, they took his name off of it. Lance, they finally stopped the relationship, with Lance. It's interesting because Nike's always been there for the athletes. When they act badly, Nike is much more willing to, cut ties.
A next question from Stuart Cesar. You see in the Tiger ad that Nike was woke long before it was in the zeitgeist. What is it in the cultural ethos of the company that allows it to be so often on the right side of history?
That's a wonderful question. This is how I explain it to people. Nike has been blessed by having an ad agency that gets sports, gets pop culture, gets Nike's role in sports and pop culture. So they just, they identify something, that is going to resonate. It's just the right time for that message. They did it with Kaepernick. Well before Kaepernick, when Steve Prefontaine was a great track star, middle distance runner at the University of Oregon. And it was when the Amateur Athletic Union made it harder for athletes to earn a living. Nike took his side in challenging, the AAU. So Nike has always been on the side of the athlete. And so when Charles Barkley wanted to do I'm not a role model ad, because he was reacting to a gang shooting in Phoenix when he was playing for the Suns, Nike gave him the platform to do that ad, even though, we heard from David Stern at the NBA, who was not happy with the fact that we were putting out a message he wasn't comfortable with, but it was a message that Nike was, which is you can't be a role model of somebody that doesn't know. You can be an athletic hero, but role models should be somebody that the kid actually has some interaction with, whether it's a teacher or parent, an aunt or uncle, a clergyman, local firefighter, somebody that they actually know. So Nike has always, I think, been on the woke side of the spectrum.
Even Just Do It was like a Rorschach for people's own self-determination in so many areas.
That's exactly right there. It was amazing, when the ad campaign hit in 1988, people still wrote letters, and we were getting letters from people saying, it gave me the courage to go back to school and complete my degree, to get out of an abusive relationship, to finally, get myself fit, to address my mental health. It was such an empowering slogan, and it has lasted. Every 5 or 10 years, they try to refresh it and talk to another generation of consumers about what it means. But that it's lasted this long, and the company's still signing off most of its ads with Just Do It. It has to be the most popular, advertising slogan that's ever happened.
Yeah, it's hard to argue it's not. And what an effect, and so right on time. Another question from Wab Bao, coinciding with the 50th anniversary, I should note, as you did. What do you see the future of Nike advertisement and marketing?
That's a great question. Yeah, and I it's funny because I have the argument with people who were there now who want to do everything online. They want it on TikTok, or they want an Instagram post or something else. And I'm old school. And I said, you can't tell, it's hard enough to tell a story in a 30 or 60-second block of time. But an Instagram posting doesn't, you have to have both. You have to hit consumers where they live. And younger people today spend most of their time on smaller screens and interacting with social media. I still think there's a place for advertising. I think Nike via Wieden Kennedy has always been great in condensing a sports related message down to a 30 or second video. One of the Wieden people had a really interesting perspective on it years ago, and said what Nike has done successfully is had its communication be a conversation with athletes, but it was interesting enough that everybody wants to listen in on it. So I think Nike will continue to pick. You won't see Nike every week on Sports Center or other things, but there'll certainly be certain events that Nike advertising will be placed on.
You did have and still do have a really special and effective relationship with Spike Lee. And Spike Lee is so tied to one of the most courageous advertising moves that anyone's ever taken, and Nike took it with him. and this guy who was kind of not known as much, Michael Jordan. Can you just talk about like the seismic change in advertising at Nike? How did you come up with that?
That was really interesting. One of the main copywriters and then the main production guy at Wyden had gone to see She's Gotta Have It, and they liked the Mars Blackman character in it. And so it was I think we had done a couple other ads with Michael first, but they decided that they wanted to use that character and have Spike direct a series of ads. And I attended Spike's induction to the Advertising Hall of Fame, and he called out the two guys from Wyden and Kennedy, saying that, they were putting Nike's franchise athlete, Michael Jordan, in an ad with an up-and-coming young Black director, when there were a lot of directors out there who'd done a lot more commercial work than Spike had done. And he was, grateful to both Nike, Wyden and Kennedy, and Michael for being willing to give him a chance. And I would think those series of ads that Spike did with Michael were tremendously influential in Nike's growth and Nike becoming such a part of pop culture.
There's which may be our final question, asking about kind of your ideas, your thought process. And I want to rephrase it this way. I've come to know you as really such a special person to me, but to so many people. Hold you in this very unusual, and I mean that in the best way, place of high regard. And I guess I want to know is what were your guiding principles? How did you what were your priorities when you were cutting deals with people that left them so not in your debt, in your esteem, like they love you?
Yeah, well, that's very kind of you to say. How do you, how to become who I became? My dad came over from Russia when he was a 14-year-old immigrant, and for a living, he painted and wallpapered for a living. Okay, and a lot of kids I went to school with, their dads were businessmen or doctors, lawyers, and stuff, and I always viewed it as how people put food on their table for their family to eat is how they put food on their table for the family to eat. It doesn't define who they are. So I've always treated everybody from, Phil Knight at Nike to the kid flipping hamburgers at the cafeteria at Nike the same way. And that includes all the talent that I've had the privilege of working with, all of the sports agents, the people at the NBA, everybody. I try to treat, with dignity and respect, and expect that back in return from them. And the sports industry is a relationship business, so if you're honest with people, I never, if negotiating a deal, if I had $200,000 to get a deal done, I didn't start my negotiating at 100,000 and gradually try to find a number. I would come in at, if I've got 280,000, I would go in at 175, knowing that people like to haggle, they like to negotiate. So I had enough room to do that, but I never lowballed anybody in a deal. If we couldn't make the deal happen, I would thank them. I'd say, look, we just don't have enough money for what your client needs on this one. Hopefully there'll be something else down the line that we can do when we have a bigger budget. So it's always I always try to treat people with respect and try to be helpful. David knows he's probably had to say no mas because I keep sending people his way who I think would be good speakers at his class. But I've always taken pride in being able to connect people who I think would like each other and could help advance their, whatever they're trying to accomplish in the world. Could be a good resource. So I've tried to do that.
It's it's no accident that you take that giving approach, and you have so many stories to tell about being in the middle of so many wonderful things. I really believe that. Is there, now where you are now, you've retired from Nike, and you're watching this sports world go where it may go. Any thoughts for us as we try to put ourselves in the right mindset to do the right things, to create the right relationships, to be a part of the right kind of future? Any wisdom that you can kind of give us?
Watch women's college basketball. Give women the opportunity to participate in sports on a, support the U.S. women's national team and their desire to be paid equally to the men's national team. That has been something that I've been following and taken interest in. Sports can do a lot of good. It can bring people together in ways that they ordinarily aren't coming together, whether as teammates on a team or people in the stands rooting for the team. So I've always thought that sports is a great teacher of lessons about how people can see beyond, color and religion and other things to just get at the essence. We're all here to try to accomplish a goal together. So be kind, be kind and respectful, and wherever your post NYU time takes you. I've always lived like what goes around comes around. If you treat people fairly, the universe will reciprocate in kind. And if you're kind of a jerk to people and take advantage of them, that'll come back to you.
In support of your ask for support of women's sports, NYU women's basketball is playing in the Sweet 16 Division III in Holland, Michigan on Friday night. I will be there.
Good for you, David.
They're 24-1. We're going for the crown.
Fantastic. Well, all the best of luck to them in their endeavors.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for bringing your royalty to our program. How much you've enriched my life, not just professional life, but showing me how to be a better person. And geez, I love these stories. I can't hear them enough from you. I think this is a show I want to take on the road. Thank you all for being here again. Spring break next week, so no Chalk Talk, but come back the following week, and another dynamic and charismatic NYU faculty member will bring another legend of the business of sports. For now,
Take care.
Professor Hollander, Mark Thomaschow. Thank you, Suzanne Hill, for your support.